Theo was the quiet, almost invisible student in class. He struggled with socializing and always got nervous when someone tried to talk to him, ending up stammering and acting awkward. Everyone knew him as the stammering weirdo, and everyone stopped trying to talk to him unless they needed something, since Theo never said no. Even when new students joined, they never noticed him. It was as if he had really become invisible. One day, a new student, Jaylen, came to their class. All the girls started whispering and giggling about how attractive he was, excited to finally have a good-looking guy in the class. When Jaylen was asked to sit after introducing himself, the girls with empty seats beside them called for him. Theo, also without a desk mate, also hoped Jaylen would sit next to him. He was drawn to Jaylen from first sight, his heart racing as Jaylen walked toward him. But of course, Jaylen walked past and sat next to Dixie, the beauty and brains of the class. Although Theo was used to not being noticed, he still felt a little hurt. He sighed, wondering why he thought Jaylen would choose to sit with him. Within just a few days, Jaylen had already made friends with almost everyone, not just in their class, but throughout the school. Theo watched him from afar always, envying how easily he socialized. That envy slowly turned into something more, and Theo's nervousness grew worse whenever Jaylen was around. He always avoided Jaylen whenever he was even a little close. One day, the class had a math test where everyone needed a scientific calculator, but Theo didn't have one. He had lent his to a classmate the day before and couldn't bring himself to ask for it back, even though he saw them holding it, preparing for the test. Theo sat there nervously, wondering how he would manage without it, since he relied on his calculator a lot. Just then, Jaylen approached without him noticing and placed a calculator in front of him. Theo looked up and saw it was Jaylen. He wanted to ask what Jaylen would use if he gave him his calculator, or at least say thank you, but he didn't want to end up badly stammering in front of him, so he pushed the calculator back. Jaylen smiled and pushed it back, saying, "Worried about me not having another?" Theo nodded, and Jaylen replied, "I don't need it. It just sits there on my desk the whole time anyway, but I can take it back if you don't want it." He playfully reached for the calculator again, and Theo quickly stopped him, mumbling an almost inaudible thank you. Jaylen smiled and wished him good luck before heading back to his seat. Theo stared at the calculator covered in Barbie stickers, and a shy smile crept onto his face. After the test, Theo nervously approached Jaylen to return the calculator. Jaylen was already surrounded by friends, talking about how the test went. Theo stood behind him, unsure how to get his attention, lightly tugging on his shirt sleeve. Thankfully, Jaylen noticed and turned around. Theo handed back the calculator, but Jaylen told him to keep it. Confused, Theo stammered, "Why?" Jaylen replied, "I just want you to have it, but on one condition." Theo stared at him, anxious about the condition. Jaylen smiled and said, "Promise you won't give it to anyone else." After a brief hesitation, Theo nodded. Jaylen ruffled his hair with a satisfied smile and said, "Don't mind the stickers. My baby sister loves putting them on everything." Theo wanted to say he didn't mind and thought it was cute, but the words wouldn't come out. Just then, Dixie walked up, starting a conversation with Jaylen and completely ignoring Theo's presence. He quietly walked away, slipping the calculator into his bag, and headed home as the school day ended. At home, Theo does something he loves doing, singing covers of songs and sometimes his own original songs, which he posted on music platforms. He didn't have many listeners, but he was content with the few who did tune in, especially one with the username Babysitter. This listener would often message him, praising his voice, encouraging him to keep singing, and even checking in on how he was doing. Theo always looked forward to these messages. During lunch at school, Theo was sitting alone in his usual spot in the cafeteria when, to his surprise, Jaylen walked up instead of sitting with his usual friends. Without waiting for a response, Jaylen asked if he could sit and immediately took a seat. Theo stopped chewing and couldn't swallow. He tried getting up to leave, but Jaylen asked, "Why are you always running away from me?" Theo sat back down and taking his time to speak carefully replied, "I'm not running away from you." Jaylen pressed, "Really? I always see you avoiding me whenever I'm near." Theo, starting to stammer, said, "I didn't know you were trying to approach me." Jaylen smiled and replied, "Guess I was just overthinking then." With Jaylen sitting right in front of him, Theo felt too shy to continue eating. He spent the rest of lunch fidgeting with his food, barely touching it. After lunch, as they returned to class, Jaylen dug into his bag and handed Theo a boxed juice and a cream bun. I saw you didn't eat much during lunch. If you get hungry, you can have this, he said, then piled up their books on the desk like a wall. You can hide behind this to eat. Theo mumbled a quiet thank you. Just as the teacher came in, Jaylen rushed to his seat, reminding Theo to eat. As class went on, Theo's stomach growled loudly, and he prayed no one noticed. He tried discreetly eating the snacks behind the makeshift wall of books. Just when it seemed like the teacher might catch him, Jaylen asked a question to distract her. Theo let out a sigh of relief and glanced at Jaylen, who shot him a smile, playfully flicked his right brow. Thanks to Jaylen's well-timed distractions, Theo managed to eat without getting caught. After class, Theo tried to approach Jaylen, but saw he was once again occupied by Dixie. He turned to leave, but just as he did, Jaylen called out his name, excused himself from Dixie, and walked over to Theo. Were you coming to see me? Jaylen asked. Theo nodded, and Jaylen continued. Did you want to thank me? Theo nodded again. Jaylen smiled and said, It's okay. Actually, I wanted to use the snacks to bribe you into accepting my friendship. You already accepted the bribe. Theo asked, Why do you want to be friends with me? Jaylen shrugged. Do I need a reason to be friends with you? Theo shook his head. Jaylen then said, So, since you accepted the bribe, do you accept the friendship? Theo hesitated. He worried that Jaylen, like everyone else, would eventually get bored of him. He didn't talk much and wasn't fun or outgoing like the others. Seeing Theo's delay, Jaylen made a mock-sad face and said, Are you going to reject me? Theo quickly shook his head. Does that mean you accept? Jaylen asked, and Theo nodded. Jaylen's face lit up with a wide smile as he ruffled Theo's hair. See you on Monday, friend, he said. Theo's heart skipped a beat at that moment as he stared at Jaylen. The first thing Theo did when he got home was check his hair in the mirror, smiling at his reflection. It was weekend, which meant no school and no seeing Jaylen. For the first time, Theo wished the weekend would pass quickly. During the weekend, he spent time writing new songs and chatting with babysitter, who did the usual check-in and asked when Theo would post a new song. When Monday finally came, as Theo was entering the classroom, Jaylen entered at the same time. Hey, how was your weekend? Jaylen asked. Theo, fidgeting with his fingers, replied, It was good. Jaylen smiled and said, I'm glad you enjoyed your weekend. He looked at Theo for a moment before asking, Aren't you going to ask me how mine was? Oh, how was your weekend? Theo asked softly. It wasn't good, Jaylen said. I wanted to talk to you during the weekend and I realized I didn't have your number. Theo blinked, surprised. Did you have something to tell me? No, I just wanted to talk with you, Jaylen said, pulling out his phone and handing it to Theo. Theo entered his number, and Jaylen asked, Do you prefer texts or calls? Normally, Theo wasn't comfortable with either, but he quietly answered, Anyone. Jaylen nodded, okay, and they both walked to their seat. As Theo sat down, his phone buzzed with a text, a cute kitten gif waving hi. He glanced over at Jaylen, who was smiling at him, gesturing for Theo to save his number. Theo smiled back shyly, unable to hold eye contact for long, and quickly looked away. In the following days, Jaylen started spending more time with Theo than with his other friends. He stuck with him during break and lunch, and after school, he would walk with Theo to the gate before they parted ways. Jaylen even helped Theo when he found it hard to say no to a classmate. At home, Jaylen would send Theo funny or cute memes and videos he found online. He also asked questions about his favorite things and dislikes, wanting to get to know him better. Theo found it much easier to be himself over text, where he felt comfortable and free. Theo couldn't help but wonder when Jaylen would get bored of him. Jaylen always seemed like he enjoyed Theo's company, but Theo found it hard to believe. He didn't think there was much enjoyable about being around him. He often noticed Dixie shooting him looks, but he wasn't sure why. Soon, it was vacation, the last one before they would graduate. One day, Jaylen asked Theo if he wanted to hang out during the break. Theo hesitated for a moment before nodding. Jaylen gave a satisfied smile and asked, Where do you want to go? Theo replied, Anywhere you choose. Jaylen looked at him and asked, "Isn't there a place you've always wanted to go?" Theo shook his head. Jaylen began listing places. "Have you ever been to the arcade?" Theo shook his head. "Karaoke? Amusement park?" Again, Theo shook his head. "For each." Jaylen smiled and said, "Then let's visit all the places you've never been to." On the day of their outing, Theo woke up early, even though they weren't meeting until the afternoon. He got dressed and anxiously sat on his bed, waiting for Jaylen's call. The moment his phone rang, Theo picked up. Jaylen asked if he was ready, and Theo nodded before quickly realizing he was on a phone call and Jaylen wouldn't see him nodding and replied, "I am." Jaylen's tone changed and explained that his grandmother had been rushed to the hospital and his parents had left to see her, leaving Jaylen to babysit his little sister. Theo felt a pang of disappointment too, but quickly reassured him, "It's okay. We can go another time. I hope your grandmother is all right." Jaylen replied that his grandmother had only sprained her ankle and would be fine. Theo said, "You can stay and look after your sister. We don't have to go today." But Jaylen insisted, "We do. I'm already dressed too. Let's meet at the bus station in 30 minutes. Surprised, Theo replied, "Oh, okay." Theo hurried to the bus station after hanging up, and when he arrived, he saw Jaylen standing there with a little girl, who he assumed was Jaylen's sister. As Theo approached, Jaylen's sister looked up and asked, "Is he your boyfriend?" Jaylen quickly covered her mouth, laughing nervously. "She's always playing matchmaker." Theo smiled and waved at the little girl, saying, "Hi." Then, turning to Jaylen, he asked, "Is she coming with us?" Jaylen shook his head. "No way. She'll want everything she sees and cry the whole time." Theo chuckled softly and asked, "Sue, what are we doing?" Jaylen responded, "I hired another babysitter for her." Just then, Theo saw Dixie approaching, and Jaylen's sister ran to her excitedly. Theo stared at her, confused and a bit jealous and hurt. Was she so close to Jaylen that even his sister liked her already? Noticing Theo's expression, Jaylen quickly explained, "Dixie and I are actually cousins." Theo's eyes widened in surprise. "Cousins?" Dixie nodded. "Yeah, no one knows because no one ever asked." Theo couldn't believe it. He had assumed Dixie was shooting him glares because she liked Jaylen and was upset that he spent so much time with Theo. As he processed this, Dixie glanced at him suspiciously again. Their bus arrived, and they had to leave. As they got on, Dixie called out teasingly, "Good luck on your date. I mean, hang out." Once they sat down, Jaylen turned to Theo and asked, "Where do you want to go first?" "Anywhere you want," Theo replied. Jaylen sighed. "Let's start at the amusement park. The arcade and karaoke are more fun at night." Theo nodded in agreement. When they arrived at the amusement park, Jaylen reached for Theo's hand, saying, "There are so many people here, I don't want you to get lost." Theo's face flushed, and his heart raced as Jaylen took his hand. Their first stop was a cotton candy stand. Jaylen asked what Theo's favorite flavor was, and Theo replied, "Grape." As the vendor began making it, the machine malfunctioned slightly, and strands of cotton candy flew out, landing on Theo's face. Jaylen burst out laughing and quickly pulled out his phone to snap a picture while Theo struggled to wipe the sticky strands off his face. Between laughs, Jaylen helped him remove the stray pieces of cotton candy. Theo's heart raced as Jaylen stood close, trying to clean off the stray cotton candy. If this continued, Theo thought his heart might burst from the intensity. When Jaylen reached a piece stuck on Theo's lips, he picked it off and casually licked it from his finger, tasting it. Theo looked at him in shock. Jaylen pulled out a wet wipe and gently cleaned Theo's face. "Does your face still feel sticky?" Theo shook his head. They continued their day, trying out some of the scary rides where Jaylen clung to Theo the entire time. By that time, Theo had relaxed and was having fun, being competitive against Jaylen. As they were leaving, they spotted a claw machine filled with stuffed toys. Jaylen, without waiting for Theo's response, asked if he wanted one and immediately put in a coin. After countless tries, he finally managed to snag a small toy. Handing it to Theo with a dramatic pout, Jaylen said, "This is all I could get for you." Theo smiled, taking the toy. "I like it." Jaylen's face lit up and said, "I want one too. You have to get one for me." Theo put in a coin, and on his very first try, he won the biggest stuffed toy in the machine. Jaylen's jaw dropped in exaggerated shock. "How are you so good at this?" he exclaimed, as Theo handed him the prize. Their final stop was karaoke, and by that point, both were tired. But Jaylen promised to take Theo to all the places he had never been to, and he looked like he was having fun. Jaylen asked Theo to sing. At first, Theo hesitated. He had never sung in front of anyone except his mirror, and only his parents had overheard him singing from his room or the bathroom. But Jaylen's pleading puppy dog eyes made it impossible to say no. Nervously, Theo gave in and sang a song. Jaylen was completely blown away by Theo's beautiful voice. "You sound like someone I know," he said, still in awe. They left the karaoke place, ready to head home. On the bus, there weren't two empty seats together, so they had to sit apart. Jaylen kept looking back the entire time to glance at Theo. When they alighted from the bus and were to part ways, Jaylen offered to walk Theo home. Theo told him it wasn't necessary, but Jaylen insisted. As they walked together, Jaylen's hand brushed against Theo's. He took Theo's hand into his, asking, "Why is your hand so cold?" He interlocked their fingers and slipped both their hands into his jacket's pocket. It wasn't long before they arrived at Theo's house. Jaylen lingered, as if he didn't want to leave, but eventually waved goodbye, and Theo did the same. The moment Theo reached his room, he threw himself onto his bed, unable to stop smiling, reliving every detail of the day. Later that night, Jaylen sent Theo a picture of himself in bed, holding the stuffed toy Theo had won for him. Theo smiled even more as he stared at the photo. When school resumed, there was a chance for everyone to switch their seats. To Theo's surprise, Jaylen came and sat beside him with his usual enthusiastic smile, waving, "Hi, I'll be your desk mate from now on. Please treat me well." Theo asked, "Why do you want to sit with me?" Jaylen sighed and replied, "I'll leave if you don't want me to sit with you." He pretended to stand up, but before he could fully rise, Theo quickly grabbed his hand. "I didn't mean that." Jaylen sat back down, smiling gently, and ruffled Theo's hair. "Why do you keep asking why? Why? I wouldn't sit with you if I didn't want to." Theo mumbled an apology, and Jaylen replied, "You don't have to apologize. If you need help with any schoolwork, you can ask me. I'm pretty smart, you know." Theo smiled softly and nodded. Over the following days, Jaylen helped Theo with his schoolwork, even though Theo never really asked, and helped when he noticed. He also even got Theo to sneakingly eat with him during class lessons. One day, while sitting in a dull class, with everyone struggling to stay awake, Jaylen slid a note to Theo, asking, "Are you feeling sleepy?" Theo glanced at him and nodded. Jaylen scribbled back, "Me too. Should we escape and skip this class?" Theo just shrugged. Out of nowhere, Jaylen said, "I'm sorry," and before Theo could ask why, Jaylen pinched his side. Startled, Theo let out a small yelp. The teacher heard the sound and asked what was going on. Jaylen quickly explained that Theo had a stomach ache and offered to take him to the infirmary. The teacher allowed them to leave, and Jaylen held onto Theo as if he really had a tummy ache. Once outside, Jaylen apologized for the pinch, explaining he wanted it to seem real. He gently rubbed the spot, apologizing again. Theo felt a tingly sensation in his stomach as Jaylen touched him and moved a bit from him, saying he was okay. They headed to the infirmary, only to find all the beds were taken except one. Jaylen joked, "Looks like a lot of people skipped class today. I doubt they're all sick." Just as someone else approached the last bed, Jaylen grabbed Theo's hand and hurried over, securing the spot and drawing the curtain around them. Jaylen laid down and motioned for Theo to join him. "I'm not that sleepy anymore," Theo said. Jaylen responded, "But you can't go back now. We have to stick to our lie." He pulled Theo down beside him, teasing, "Are you scared I'll do something to you?" Theo stayed quiet, and Jaylen added, "You really think I'd do something?" Theo quickly shook his head. Jaylen smirked, "What could I possibly do to you here?" He closed his eyes and moved into Theo's arms, saying, "The bed's small. We have to sleep like this to be comfortable." Theo could hear his heartbeat and was praying Jaylen wouldn't hear it as his ears was close to his chest. Within minutes, Jaylen drifted off, and after calming his racing heart, Theo eventually fell asleep too. Theo woke up first after a while and found himself face to face with Jaylen, their noses barely an inch apart. He noticed Jaylen opening his eyes and quickly shut his, pretending to still be asleep. Jaylen, Theo's eyelids twitching, and knew he was faking it. He stifled a laugh and poked Theo's cheek with two fingers, making a soft kissing sound. Theo's eyes flew open. What are you doing? He asked, flustered. Jaylen, playing ignorance, replied, what did I do? Theo touched his cheek, and Jaylen teased, do you think I kissed you? I just poked your cheek. Like this, he said, poking his cheek again for emphasis. Feeling embarrassed, Theo quickly sat up. I think we should head back to class, hurrying out of the infirmary. Jaylen watched him leave, chuckling to himself. During class, Theo could feel Jaylen's eyes on him from the corner of his eyes. He turned Jaylen's head to face the board. At night, as Theo lay in bed, thinking about Jaylen's behavior recently, after posting a new song, received a notification from his top fan, Babysitter, praising the new song he had just posted. Overwhelmed by the many questions swirling in his mind, Theo decided to talk to his #1 fan about it. Can I talk to you about something personal? He messaged. Of course, Babysitter replied. Theo typed, there's this boy in my class. He's really nice to me, but he's nice like that to everyone too. Lately though, he's been acting extra nice and kind of flirty. Do you think he likes me? Babysitter replied, do you like him? Theo hesitated before sending, maybe. I think I do. Babysitter followed up with, does he act flirty with other people too? Not that I've seen, Theo admitted. Then there's a chance he likes you. Why not try flirting back to see how he reacts? Babysitter suggested. Theo immediately replied, I can't do that, and when asked why, he added, I'm just too shy and awkward for that. Babysitter replied, then just observe him. If he treats you more specially than everyone else, you might have a chance. The next day at school, Jaylen walked into class with AirPods in, seemingly lost in whatever he was listening to. As he placed his phone on the desk and took off his bag, Theo caught a glimpse of the screen. To his surprise, Jaylen was listening to a song by Purple Grape Lover, which was him. His eyes widened, and Jaylen noticed his reaction, pulling out one AirPod. What's wrong? You listen to Purple Grape Lover? Theo asked, trying to keep his cool. Jaylen's face lit up. You know him? I'm a huge fan. I thought I was the only one at this school who knew about him. Theo felt a mix of happiness and panic. He wanted to smile, but then noticed Jaylen's username, Babysitter, the same babysitter he had confided in just the night before. His stomach dropped. What if Jaylen found out he was Purple Grape Lover? He would definitely know the boy he was talking about was him. Is that your username? Theo asked, trying to stay calm. Jaylen chuckled. Yeah, I'm always babysitting my baby sister, so I thought it fit. Oh, Theo said, his mind racing. What's your username? Jaylen asked. Theo froze. I need to go to the bathroom. He jumped up and hurried out of the classroom. Throughout the day, Jaylen thankfully didn't ask about his username again. That night, Babysitter messaged him, curious about his progress with his crush. Theo buried his face in his pillow, not replying, and silently wished for the world to swallow him whole. Over the next few days, Theo didn't respond to any of Babysitter's texts. At school, Jaylen asked him, what does it mean when someone who usually replies to your texts right away suddenly ghosts you? Theo assumed Jaylen was talking about Purple Grape Lover himself. He replied, maybe he's just busy and hasn't had time to respond. What if something bad happened to him? Jaylen asked. Theo quickly replied, nothing bad happened to him. He's totally fine. Jaylen gave him a suspicious look. Do you know who I'm talking about? With a nervous laugh, Theo responded, absolutely not. How would I know? Of course I don't. Jaylen said, you're really talkative today. Yeah, I'm just decided to get out of my shell, Theo replied, still nervously laughing. Jaylen smiled. That's good. I'm proud of you. Just then, someone called for Jaylen, and as he left, Theo let out a sigh of relief. At that moment, Dixie approached and plopped down in Jaylen's seat, eyeing him closely. Do you like Jaylen? She asked. Huh? Theo replied, caught off guard. I'm really good at spotting secret crushes. You like him, don't you? She pressed. I think you're mistaken, he mumbled almost inaudibly. Okay, Dixie shrugged. I was going to play Cupid for you both, but I guess I was wrong. She started to get up, but Theo grabbed her arm, stopping her. She sat back down, a wide grin on her face. So you really do like him? Theo nodded, biting his lip. I don't know what you see in him, Dixie said, but I'll help you. You don't really need it though. Jaylen's already got it bad for you. I think he fell first, to be honest. When Jaylen returned, he noticed Dixie in his seat. What were you two talking about? He asked. None of your business, Dixie shot back, standing up to return to her own seat. Jaylen rolled his eyes and then turned to Theo, who pretended to focus on his book, avoiding the question. Jaylen remarked, You too? After school, Dixie urged Theo to join her and her friends at the smoothie cafe behind the school. Before he could protest, she had already pulled him along. When they arrived, Theo felt anxious being alone with them. One girl casually remarked, How did I never notice this cutie in our class? Are you single? Dixie quickly chimed in, Sorry, he's taken, or he will be very soon. She sighed and added, At least we still have Jaylen. Sorry, he's off the market too, Dixie teased, and they all laughed, including Theo. Dixie and her friends were very fun and easygoing, and it wasn't long before Theo got comfortable around them. He thought to himself if socializing was this easy. The next day at school, while Jaylen was out of class, Dixie switched their bags, taking Jaylen's to her seat and bringing hers to his. What are you doing? Theo asked, confused. Helping you. You two need a break from each other, she said. Why? Theo questioned. She answered, When you're always together, he won't feel the urgency to ask you to be his boyfriend. He needs to miss you, to feel like you're slipping away. Do I really have to do that? Theo asked. Yes, trust me, Dixie replied. When Jaylen returned and saw Dixie in his seat, he motioned for her to move, but she said it was her seat now. Noticing she had even moved his bag, he tried to move her, but she clung to Theo for support. Jaylen asked her to let go of Theo, but she told him it was Theo that asked her to switch seats. Jaylen turned to Theo, seeking help, but Theo stayed silent. Just then, the teacher entered, and Jaylen had to reluctantly sit in Dixie's seat, sulking as he shot annoyed glances at her. Dixie stuck her tongue out when she noticed his irritation. During lunch, before Jaylen could approach Theo, Dixie pulled him away, not giving him a chance to speak. The same happened at the end of the school day. Over the next few days, Jaylen barely had a moment to talk to Theo, as he was always with Dixie and her friends, who seemed intent on keeping him from Jaylen. Theo went along with it, enjoying his new company. It was like he was now a part of the friend group. With them, he was finally getting to live the high school experience he had been missing out on. He loved hanging out with them, but he also missed being with Jaylen. One day, while sitting with his new friends during lunch, Theo noticed Jaylen was nowhere to be found. Just then, his phone chimed with a message from Jaylen, showing a picture of him in the infirmary looking unwell. He showed the message to Dixie, who dismissed it, saying, He's just pretending. Don't go. But what if he's really sick? Theo countered. He was perfectly fine just a moment ago. I know he's faking, Dixie insisted. Theo had already made up his mind and stood up to leave. Dixie sighed dramatically. Completely hopeless, she muttered. Theo rushed to the infirmary and found Jaylen lying in one of the beds. He sat beside him and touched his face to check his temperature. Suddenly, Jaylen grabbed his hand and opened his eyes, sitting up. Startled, Theo asked, Are you okay? Jaylen looked at him with a sad expression. What's going on? Why are you avoiding me? Theo hesitated, unsure how to respond. Are you tired of me? Jaylen pressed. Theo quickly shook his head. No. After a moment, Jaylen asked, Wait, did Dixie put you up to this? Theo nodded. I should have known. That annoying insect. What did she tell you? That we need a break from each other, Theo replied. Why? Jaylen asked, but Theo fell silent, saying Dixie's plan will be like confessing his feelings. A smile crept onto Jaylen's face as he seemed to connect the dots. Did she say something like, if we're always together, I won't feel the urgency to make you my boyfriend? Theo's eyes widened. How did you know? Jaylen responded. She says that to everyone she's playing Cupid for. It kind of works, so she always tells them that. Oh, Theo murmured, feeling embarrassed. Jaylen leaned closer, his voice low. Theo, do you like me? Theo froze, unable to breathe as his heart raced. He stammered, I need to go. Lunch is over. Lessons will start soon. Jaylen pulled him back, moving even closer. If you don't say anything, I'll assume you do. You don't need Dixie to play Cupid for us. I was just waiting until after our final exams to make you mine. I didn't want you to have distractions while preparing. Theo's heart raced even faster. What do you mean? He asked, almost inaudibly. Jaylen replied softly, I love you, Theo. Theo immediately stood up, saying, give me a minute, and rushed to the bed in the corner of the room, closing the curtains. He took deep breaths to calm himself. Jaylen approached, a light grin on his face. Are you okay? Should I call the school nurse? I'm okay, Theo replied. Jaylen sat beside him, cupping his cheeks. Are you sure? Your face is really hot and red. Theo replied he really was okay. Jaylen paused, gazing into his eyes, then asked, Theo, will you date me? Why do you like me? Theo asked. Why again? Jaylen sighed. Theo, I don't need a reason to love you. I love you because you are you. I can't explain how I feel when I'm with you, but I know I love you and want to spend every day of my life with you. Tears began to roll down Theo's cheeks. Why are you crying? Jaylen chuckled. I don't know, Theo replied. Jaylen hugged him tightly and asked, will you give me a chance to love you? Theo nodded vigorously, tightening his arms around Jaylen and burying his face in his shoulder. Jaylen smiled widely, also tightening his arms around Theo. After breaking the hug, Jaylen said, do you remember our first kiss was here? We didn't, Theo immediately countered. Jaylen smirked. Should we have our first kiss here then? He pulled Theo close, staring at his lips. We'll get into trouble if we get caught, Theo said. Jaylen leaned in and said, so you agree for me to kiss you? I didn't say that, Theo replied, but before he could finish, Jaylen kissed him, pressing his lips against Theo's. Theo kissed back, gripping Jaylen's shirt. Jaylen turned Theo onto the bed, with him on top while they kissed. Theo gently pushed back and said, we are in school, Jaylen replied. I know. He crossed his arms over his chest and asked, what are you thinking? Want to take advantage of me? Then he got off the bed, adding, we should head to class now. Theo sat there bewildered. Jaylen took his hand, got him up, and they both headed to class. There was no teacher, and Dixie was still in Jaylen's seat. Jaylen locked his fingers with Theo's and waved them at Dixie, saying, you don't have to sit here anymore. Dixie smiled widely. You two are dating already? My plan worked as always, Jaylen scoffed. Your stupid plan? Dixie dramatically gasped. Did you just call my plan stupid? She turned to Theo. Do you think my plan was stupid? Theo just smiled, just enjoying their banter. Dixie then said, oh, so you're on his side now. I see, you don't need me anymore. She got up, carrying her bag to her old seat, then picked up Jaylen's bag and threw it at him. Jaylen stuck his tongue out at her, just like she had done before. Finals were approaching, and everyone was busy with their books. Jaylen offered to tutor Theo in the subjects he was struggling with. Even with the pressure of exams, they couldn't resist flirting. Jaylen asked for a kiss as a reward every 10 minutes during their study sessions. They also went on dates to relax and take a break from studying. On their last day in class before exams began, everyone was reminded about the upcoming graduation ball. Jaylen slid a note to Theo that read, will you be my date for the graduation ball? Theo chuckled and teased, are you in kindergarten? Even kindergartners don't do this anymore. Jaylen pouted, oh, you're so mean to me these days. Theo tossed Jaylen's pen to the floor, and when Jaylen bent down to pick it up, Theo followed, kissing him under the table and saying, you don't have to ask, I'm already yours. He returned to his seat like nothing had happened, while Jaylen, flustered, hit his head trying to get back up. After exams were over, the school was buzzing with students asking their crushes and partners to be their dates. Jaylen had already secured his, and they walked out hand in hand. Theo went shopping with the girls to find an outfit for the ball. The girls helped him pick out a tuxedo, and he helped them choose dresses after trying on almost everything in the store. On the night of the ball, Jaylen picked Theo up from Dixie's house, where he had stayed with the girls. When Jaylen saw Theo, he gave a dramatic gasp and complimented, you look stunning, before kissing him. Theo smiled and replied, you look amazing too. Jaylen mocked Dixie for not having a date, then left with Theo. At the ball, when it was time to slow dance, Jaylen and Theo stepped onto the floor. As they danced, Jaylen remarked, you dance so well, purple grape lover. Theo was caught off guard. How did you know? When did you find out? Jaylen explained that he had figured it out after sending a message to Purple Grape Lover and seeing the notification pop up on Theo's phone. Embarrassed, Theo mumbled, "Oh." Jaylen then asked, "So, that boy in your class was me?" Theo quickly responded, "Please don't bring that up." Jaylen chuckled, leaned in, kissed Theo, and said, "Yes, I like you. I love you." Theo whispered, "I love you too." Jaylen smiled widely and leaned in for another kiss. Theo stopped him, saying that people were watching. Jaylen simply replied, "Let them watch," pulling Theo closer by the waist and kissing him again.